Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. My name's Sheldon Dillingham. I'm with Avitrol, and this is Drive-By Bird Control. In this video, I'm going to give you some tips on how to successfully pre-bait a site. Now, if you haven't had a chance to watch our video on how to survey a site or how to gauge site sensitivity, I would recommend that you stop now and go back and watch those videos because that's going to lay a foundation to help you pre-bait successfully. So first, let's talk about some of the reasons why pre-baiting is important. And the number one factor is to establish a trusted food source there on the site. You want the birds to actually react and associate their negative reaction with the site itself rather than with the bait that they're eating. If you approach it and come in straight with the live bait, unfortunately, you run high chances of getting them where they eat it the first time, react, and then later when they go to eat, they have detected that there's something wrong with the bait itself and they'll become bait shy. You don't want that to happen because that can make your treatment process take longer overall. Another reason why pre-baiting is important is it allows you to keep an eye open for non-target activity. There is no distinction between live bait and pre-bait. So if you're treating with Avitrol whole corn, you're going to use regular untreated whole corn. You can't tell a difference between the two, and neither can the birds. So if non-targets are feeding on your pre-bait, they're 100% definitely going to feed on your live bait. So it's important for you to keep an eye open and make sure that non-targets are not actively feeding on your pre-bait. And then another reason why it's important for you to pre-bait is it helps you determine how many birds you're actually treating. So for instance, 100 pigeons are going to eat about 10 pounds of grain per day. So based on the amount of pre-bait that they're eating, that's going to help you determine how much live bait actually needs to be in the mix based on their overall consumption. Now that we've talked about why it's important to pre-bait, let's talk about some tips on how you can actually pre-bait there on the site. When you're pre-baiting, you're going to want to monitor the amount of bait that you have available and make sure that you keep enough where it's consistently available. For instance, if you know that the birds are eating, about 10 pounds of grain per day and you're going to come back every 3 days, what you'll do is you'll break up the amount of grain that you make available into, let's say, 10-pound segments, so there's enough for each day, and then just refill that when you come back on day 3 and keep that going as long as it takes to get the majority of them feeding on that pre-bait. Next, you'll want to determine whether or not you need to keep techs on site during your live baiting period. If the site's sensitive, you'll probably want to keep someone there, and during your pre-baiting, you're determining how many birds there are and how spread out of an area it is that you're pre-baiting at. You're going to determine if you need techs on site and how many techs you need to keep on site when your live bait goes down. And the most important factor when you're pre-baiting is you'll want to pre-bait until the majority of the flock is feeding on the pre-bait. What you want when you introduce your live bait later on is you want as many birds as possible to see the reactions. So if the majority of them are feeding on the pre-bait, you have a greater chance of more of the flock seeing the reactions overall and then seeing those reactions and leaving the site after. Another thing is you're going to want to spread out your bait piles to make sure that dominant flock members don't get in and gorge themselves on the bait, which means, especially in sensitive sites, if you're trying to limit mortality, you're trying to limit the amount of overdosages that you have from birds that are consuming too much. So if you spread out those bait piles, it allows other birds to get in and feed without dominant flock members pushing the other birds out and away from that bait. And then lastly, your pre-baiting is going to help you determine what your live baiting ratio is. The gauge that I like to use is if you've got 50 birds or less, you've got a little bit of flexibility in what your dilution ratio should be because you're only affecting a certain percentage of them. But if you've got 50 birds or more on your site, then you're going to want to adjust your dilution ratio to something that's a very highly diluted mix. And so based on the amount that's consumed, that's going to help you determine exactly how many birds are there in the flock and how much live bait needs to be in your mix overall. So that's all the tips I've got for you today. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for even more Drive-By Bird Control.